Ever get the feeling like those light bulb moments, they seem to come out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Well, get ready to explore that nowhere because today we're diving into, well, darkness.
Okay.
You sent over this excerpt from Darkness, The Art of Wealth Creation, and it makes this kind of wild connection between, darkness and creating something new.
Yeah, it is interesting how it uses that void, described in Genesis as like this starting point for innovation. It's like before we can create anything valuable, you need that creative void.
Yeah, so let's unpack this whole darkness thing a little bit because it's almost like paradoxical in a way, right?
Yeah.
The source argues that darkness isn't just the absence of light, but almost like fertile ground, like a space where ideas can really take root. It even uses this metaphor, comparing it to like a womb for our ideas.
Yeah, and it is a very vivid image, and it makes you think about it like an artist facing a blank canvas, right? Or a composer. They need that silence before the music starts flowing. So it's not about literally being in the dark. It's more about quieting the noise, those preconceived notions, all the stuff we put on ourselves. And in that sort of stillness, that's where true innovation can like bubble up.
Makes sense. And the source uses Steve Jobs, right, as an example, talking about how he took a calligraphy class back in college, seemingly had nothing to do with his career path at the time.
Yeah.
But years later, those artistic principles he kind of absorbed, they influenced the design of the first Mac.
Right, and the source suggests that those years in between, that was his period of darkness. It's where those seeds of inspiration from the calligraphy class were like, quietly germinating. And, those years weren't unproductive for him. He was exploring, experimenting. It's like the source says, darkness is not an end, but a beginning.
And what a beginning, right? Because this source really emphasizes just how impactful the iPhone and App Store have been. Completely revolutionized how we communicate, how we do business. I mean, the App Store alone spawned a whole new economy. It's crazy.
It really is. And it all goes back to that idea of, wealth creation that's in the title of the source. Because, what is wealth? It's not just money. It's about value creation. And that value often comes from this space of, darkness, exploring the unknown, challenging how things have always been done, just like Jobs did with the iPhone.
But I imagine facing that darkness, that unknown, it can be pretty daunting, especially if you're thinking about like starting a business, right?
Yeah.
Lots of uncertainty, potential for fear to like creep in. How does the source suggest we navigate that?
Yeah, you're right. Venturing into, the unknown, it can be uncomfortable. But the source, it makes this point that a lot of that fear we feel, it's really just coming from, inside our own heads.
It's like that line from the source. We often fear what we cannot see, but true vision is found not by chasing the light, but by learning to see in the dark. It's easy to get caught up in like worst case scenarios, but are we really being realistic, or are we just like letting our imaginations get away from us?
Totally. And that's where the source encourages us to kind of like shift our perspective on uncertainty, right? Because it's not about like getting rid of the unknown completely. That's impossible, especially with entrepreneurship. It's more about like getting comfortable with the fact that, you don't have all the answers.
So instead of running from the darkness, we need to get comfortable navigating it. Is that what the source is suggesting?
Exactly. It's all about embracing that exploration, that process of trying things out and like iterating. It's understanding that the path to success is rarely a straight line. There's going to be twists and turns, things you don't expect, and times when you just have to like feel your way forward. And the key is to not let those moments, totally freeze you up.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The source actually suggests that this fear of the dark, of not knowing, it's often more limiting than the darkness itself. Like, we're so afraid of what might be out there that we don't even give ourselves the chance to like discover something amazing.
It's true, isn't it? Because what is entrepreneurship if it's not being willing to step into that unknown and create something new? And to do that, you kind of have to be okay with not having everything figured out.
It's almost like our obsession with needing to know everything, with having it all perfectly clear, maybe that's actually what's preventing us from stumbling onto those truly groundbreaking ideas. The source seemed to be saying that sometimes we need to just put down the flashlight and trust our other senses.
That's a great way to put it. Because when we let go of that need to have it all figured out, that's when we open ourselves up to new ways of thinking, new possibilities. And that's where the really innovative stuff happens, right? In that space between what we know and what we haven't discovered yet.
The source also talks about how this darkness, it's not just about the absence of light, it's also about the absence of constraints, which I think is super relevant for, like you said, someone who's thinking about starting a business.
For sure, because when you're starting a business, you have this incredible opportunity to create something totally new. You're not stuck with the same old rules and limitations that some big company might have. You're free to experiment, to really take risks, to explore those uncharted territories.
Which, of course, can be both exhilarating and, kind of terrifying at the same time.
Exactly. But that's where the magic happens, right? In that space of creative darkness, where you can break free from all that conventional thinking and actually create something truly innovative.
So if we're like really trying to embrace this darkness idea, getting comfy with uncertainty and all, what does that even look like, practically, especially for someone who's actually about to start a business?
Right. How do you actually put it into practice? And the source doesn't give you a step-by-step guide or anything, but it does say it starts with a mindset shift. It's about reframing failure not as this big scary thing, but as a totally normal part of learning and growing.
Yeah, the source actually talks about how being too focused on just succeeding can actually stifle creativity. It's
Yeah.
like we're so scared of messing up that we never actually take the risks that could lead to those breakthrough moments.
Exactly. And the source uses this really great analogy about a sculptor with a block of stone. They don't start out seeing this perfect statue, right? They start by being willing to chip away at the parts that don't fit, to make mistakes even, and learn from each piece that comes off. And eventually they end up with something totally beautiful and unique.
Such a good analogy. And it makes you think, right, so often when we're starting a business, we want to have every little thing figured out perfectly from day one.
Yeah.
But what if instead we just embrace that initial darkness,
Yeah.
that time of experimenting, trying things out as just a normal part of the whole process?
Right, exactly. It's about giving yourself permission to explore different paths, test stuff out, and yeah, even fail sometimes.
Yeah.
But not seeing it as a full-on failure, more like a learning experience. Because a lot of times those failures are what lead you to the most innovative solutions in the end.
So wrapping up our deep dive here, looking at darkness is this, unexpected fuel for creativity. The main takeaway is that it's not something to be scared of, but something to actually embrace. Would you agree with that?
Totally. This whole conversation, it reminds me of this Einstein quote: "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." And I feel like the source we've been looking at, it's kind of urging us to remember that gift, that intuitive creative spark that really thrives in those darker, less defined spaces.
It's about trusting your gut, being willing to step into the unknown, even when you don't have all the answers. Remembering that sometimes the most brilliant ideas, they come not from the bright lights, but from the shadows. So as you're getting ready to start your own business, just remember that path ahead, it might not always be perfectly clear, and that's okay. Embrace the darkness, trust your instincts, and you might be surprised by what you end up creating.